Pretend you love me for 10 minutes, she said, breathless, rain sparking off her lashes like static. Dean blinked at the woman who'd just burst into the indie cafe, sleek pencil coat hair pinned like a decision eyes scanning for exits. Outside the window, paparazzi stacked along the curb umbrellas tilting like black satellites. Inside the coffee shop breathed warm oak tables, brass lamps, glass panes so clean you could see the weather in them. 10 minutes, Dean repeated, still holding a damp towel over the steam wand. That's oddly specific, because I only need 10 to get the wolves bored. She flicked her gaze at the crowd beyond the glass. And because I don't make a habit of lying longer than necessary. From the corner, a small voice, Dad, Leo 8, pencil poised over his math worksheet, stared at the stranger, then at the window where cameras winked. Are we in trouble? Dean gave Leo the kind of smile that could steady a kite in a storm. Not today, champ. He set the towel down, glanced at the clock, 5:42 p.m., and the framed sign that said House Policy. No drama, just coffee. Then looked back at the woman. He recognized her from 100 headlines and one particularly vicious morning show segment. Juliet Hart, self-made billionaire, the woman with a company, a spine, and a rumor she hadn't ordered. Okay, Dean said. Ground rules. No touching, that'd make my kid uncomfortable. You'll follow my lead even if it looks ridiculous, and we're stopping at 9 minutes and 59 seconds. For the first time since she crashed through the door, something like amusement crooked the edge of her mouth. Deal. He stepped into her space with the quiet of someone who'd changed light bulbs on a 12-foot ladder, confident, economical. Dean walked her toward the front where the flashes could get a generous frame, and with a nod to Leo Timer, his son lifted the math book like a clapperboard and said, "And action." Dean reached for a cappuccino tray, a metal shield gleaming under cafe lights. He turned, placing himself between Juliet and the glass. Outside, someone shouted, "Juliet, over here! Who's the guy?" Another yelled a name that wasn't hers. Juliet's shoulders tensed, then settled. Dean angled the tray so the reflections ghosted over the cameras, fracturing their line of sight. To the lenses, it would read as intimacy, a man leaning in conspiratorial. "You're very good at this," Juliet murmured low. "I mop floors," Dean replied. "And trouble." He pointed to the window with his chin. "Tilt your head like you just heard a better story than the one they're selling." She did. The gesture softened her jaw, melted the boardroom steel into something fiercely human. Dean lifted a cup he'd poured earlier, heart-shaped foam still perfect, and pressed it into her hand. "For the photograph you didn't ask for." Her laughter was soft, the kind that runs under a door. "Do you hand out props to all your pretend girlfriends?" "Only the one I'm dating for 9 more minutes," he said, and she almost spilled the foam heart. From the corner, Leo called, "Dad, he's at the door." Dean glanced. Paparazzi had pushed the cafe door an inch. He moved before the hinge could squeal, calm as a tide. The tray came up, catching the door with the cool clang of polite steel. "House Policy," he told the photographer at the threshold tone so even it could have been a temperature. "Order or out." "Come on, man," the photographer groaned, rain dripping off his jacket. "She's public interest." "No," Juliet said, stepping to Dean's side, voice clear. "I'm a human being. There's a difference." The door eased shut. Outside, the wall of umbrellas rippled in irritation and then resettled like crows on a wire. Inside, time clicked forward 2 minutes. "Sit," Dean suggested to Juliet. "By the window, but back a little. If they want a show, let's make one that doesn't cost your soul." She slid into a booth. Dean set another cup down for show, then, without breaking the rhythm, knelt to tug the napkin dispenser forward, creating a humble little barricade just enough to keep prying eyes from reading her phone screen if she needed to text. It was a janitor's trick, solve the problem people don't know they have. Juliet watched him work and said almost to herself, "I hire consultants for crisis management. Turns out I needed a barista." "Don't be offended," Dean said, "but I'm off the clock in 20. After that, I'm strictly a dad. I'm not offended." She paused. "I'm relieved. 5 minutes." The lights hummed. The rain grew thoughtful. Dean could feel the gaze of the room calibrate regulars pretending not to stare, a pair of college kids whispering, the owner polishing the same glass for an unnecessary length of time. Juliet took a careful sip, then set the cup down as if it were a fragile truth. "They called me reckless on cable this morning. The lie was more elegant than the correction will ever be." Dean leaned on the booth across from her in easy distance. "There's a trick to lies," he said. They burn quick and bright. Truth isn't much for fireworks, it just stays. That's supposed to comfort me, no, Dean said, a small smile flickering. It's supposed to anchor you. She looked at him, really looked. The light skimmed his face, catching the clean stubble, the dimple that appeared only when he wasn't watching himself perform. He didn't have a wolf's eyes or a savior's posture. He had the stance of a man who had learned to ask a mess what it wanted to become. Leo patted over with the soft thud of sneakers. Time check, he announced. We're at 7 minutes. Also, I finished the fractions. Show me. Dean slid over to make room. He put a hand lightly on his son's shoulder. Juliet watched the way he touched, never owning, always assuring. She's seen men sign billion-dollar partnerships with less reverence than this father gave a homework sheet. You're good with him, Juliet said the words out before she could dress them. You make hard things look like everyday things. That's the job, Dean answered. Only job I ever wanted to be great at. Something moved behind her eyes. There it was, the bruise the rumors couldn't name. Juliet caught it fast the way a person snatches a glass before it falls. She glanced at the window. The cameras were still there, but some had wandered off in search of a louder storm. 8 minutes. What's your name? She asked suddenly. Besides, guy who blocks cameras with a coffee tray. Dean Walker. That's Leo, he said, nodding. I'm Juliet. I know, Leo replied, serious as a judge. My grandma watches you on the business channel and yells at the TV when the men interrupt. Juliet laughed again. This time it landed warmer. Tell your grandma I'm fine. I've been interrupted by experts. She'll like that, Leo said and returned to his table. Mission complete. Dean straightened. So, how do you want to exit this scene? Juliet thought for a beat, then surprised both of them. I'll walk out the back. They'll forget me when dinner starts and the city turns its face to neon. But, could you stand in the doorway with the tray until I'm out of the alley? I don't want them getting bold. He picked up the tray, spun it once like a coin catching light. Bold men love a mirror, he said, and tipped his head to the glass. Ready. Ready. She rose, smoothed her coat. Instinct tugged her shoulders back into the precise geometry of command. But as she reached the door, she turned. Dean. Yeah, you didn't ask why I needed this. I didn't need the story to do the decent thing, Dean said. Dignity doesn't ask for a spotlight. It brings its own light. Her throat closed around a reply. The kindness was not noisy. It made space. It made weather. It made a person want to stand differently inside their name. They moved Dean, first tray, up a courteous shield. Juliet, close behind steps, measured chin level. Leo watched from the booth, counting under his breath like a stage manager, 9:30, 9:40, 9:50. They cut through the back corridor, smelling of cinnamon and rainy coats. At the exit, Dean nudged the door with his shoulder and gave the alley a weather report. Clear enough. Juliet slipped into the gray light. The downpour had softened to a drifting mist. Somewhere a siren rode a thin line across the blocks. Somewhere else, a bus sighed. She paused, turned. Thank you, she said. Not the perfunctory kind, this one carried its own weight, for not making it a transaction. 10 minutes are up, he said gently. You don't owe me anything. Juliet lifted her chin like a vow. Then here's what I owe myself to walk out of here with my head still attached to my heart. She tucked a card on the bulletin board by the door, then thought better of it and slid it face down on Leo's math book instead. If the world gets noisy again, call. I can return a favor. We're good, Dean said, but his eyes said he understood the language of lifelines. She hesitated, and in that 2-second silence they shook hands without touching. Then Juliet stepped into the rain, collected herself like a headline rewritten, and vanished toward the corner. Dean stood in the doorway until the alley turned back into an ordinary slice of city. He lowered the tray. The cafe exhaled. Leo trotted up solemn. Was she a princess? No, Dean said, grinning despite himself. She's the kind of girl who builds the castle and negotiates for better sidewalks. Leo nodded, satisfied. Cool. Dean ruffled his hair, returned to the machine, and steamed milk that sounded like a small train leaving an honest station. He wiped the counterset cups in a row, turned the open sign to closed with ceremony. Outside, the umbrellas were gone. Rain just rained. On a table, the card lay, flipped a small white island, Juliet Hart Chief Executive Officer Heartline. A direct number inked beneath in quick decisive strokes and unexpectedly a tiny drawn heart that looked like a coffee bean. Dean didn't pocket it. He tucked it under the register where lost things waited to be claimed. Ready for home, kiddo? He asked. Leo shouldered his backpack, the weight of fractions and weather. Can we make hot cocoa? Always. They stepped into the rinsed evening, father and son, the kind of pair the city overlooks until it needs saving. The storm lights shifted to amber. Somewhere downtown, a newsroom slotted a headline, Juliet Hart spotted with mystery man. In the photo, a coffee tray glinted like a knight's shield. Tomorrow morning, in a glass tower with a skyline view, Juliet would push through the lobby and find that her 10-minute boyfriend mopped the floors of her empire. And neither of them would pretend it meant nothing. Maya Chen tapped her pen once, the soft click echoing in the glass-walled boardroom like a gavel. Morning sun climbed the skyline beyond them. The city looked composed, as if it had ironed its shirt. Juliet stood at the head of the table with the stillness of someone who knew how to quiet a room. On the screen behind her, a short deck, 3 slides, no drama. Across the table, 2 board members on video, a legal associate, and 1 empty chair waiting for the wild card. Agenda Maya said. Stabilize optics ahead of the quarterly meeting. Decide a narrative we can live with. Choose the hard way now or the impossible way later. Juliet exhaled through her nose. Hard way, she said. Always. The door opened. Dean stepped in hair damp from a downtown walk shirt without the cafe apron, the same careful posture that suggested he'd been the tallest kid in class and never used it to loom. He clocked the polished floor, the glass walls, the insulated quiet, this whole cathedral of money, and found the empty chair without being told. Mr. Walker, Maya said, rising to shake his hand. Thank you for coming on short notice. Dean nodded. I come cheap, he said evenly, but I don't come careless. Juliet's mouth twitched. Maya's eyes warmed a fraction. They could work with that. She clicked the remote. The next slide was a collage of headlines. Some were false, some were just lazy. All were loud. Our analysts say the market's not panicking, Maya said, but the chatter is corrosive. You already know the rules of the modern game. If we don't tell the story, someone sells us theirs. Juliet folded her hands. A silver ring, unadorned, stern, caught the light. I want a story without varnish, she said. One that says I'm not auditioning for sainthood. I'm leading a company. On time. Above board. Dean glanced at the window where the city's angles stacked like truths you could stand on. So, why am I here? Maya looked to Juliet. Juliet didn't flinch. Because yesterday, in a room that smelled like cinnamon and rain, you helped me keep my head attached to my heart, she said. And because the photos are out there now. I didn't plan the rumor, but I can steer the narrative. For 3 weeks, we appear as a couple at a handful of public events. We act like we're dating. We act like human beings. No lies about who you are. No charade that steps on your dignity. Dean listened the way a father listens when a storm is thinking about changing lanes. Why 3 weeks? Because that carries us through the shareholder meeting, Maya answered. Because it's honest to the arc of news cycles. And because if this goes any longer, it becomes a campaign. We are not running for anything. Dean leaned back. Ground rules. Juliet slid a slim folder across the table. Inside were pages that didn't apologize for being paper. We drafted terms. No expensive gifts. No physical contact beyond what we mutually agreed to in the moment, and never in front of Leo without his comfort. No intrusion into your private life. I will not use you as a prop. Add one more, Dean said. Veto power on everything that touches my son, he said. If a camera angle catches him, if a schedule bump interferes with his routine, if a story threatens to make him content, my no is the end of the sentence. Juliet met his gaze head on. Done. Maya added, we'll develop a parallel plan to protect Leo's privacy. Separate from PR. That comes under safety, not optics. Dean nodded once. He didn't say thank you. The acknowledgement lived in how his shoulders lowered by a single degree. What's the fee? Juliet asked businesslike as if she were requesting door measurements for a new hinge. Dean's jaw worked, then stilled. I need a lawyer, he said. Not a cousin who prints forms at cost. A real one. There's a custody review coming. The other party wants more weekends. I want what's best for my boy. That costs retainer money I don't have. Juliet didn't blink. We'll set a transparent payment that reflects work, not power dynamics. It will go to your counsel directly, not through me. Maya was already typing. Third-party trust. Clean line. Full compliance. Dean half smiled. You're very good at making decent things boring. That's the only way decent things stay, Maya said, returning the smile. Juliet turned a page in the folder. Appearances, she said. We start with the ESG Fund Launch Gala tonight. It's not our event. We're only a host partner, so the room will be… Mixed. Mixed how, Dean asked. Old money. New money. A few true believers. A few wolves in priest collars, Maya said. Smile without surrender. Speak little, but when you do say something that fits on a post-it. Cameras like sentences that can live alone. Dean's lips quirked. You have a whole theology for this. I have a spine, Maya said mildly, and a job I can do without rinsing my conscience with bleach. They hashed specifics. No social media posts from Dean, no off-the-record drinks with reporters. A standing signal if either of them needed to cut an interaction short a hand over the coffee cup, a nothing gesture that meant everything. Juliet would loop security and facilities so that Dean wouldn't get hassled at entrances. His badge would clear him and Leo to public floors during daytime hours without as he lost energy from reception. The legal associate laid out consent language like a neat row of wrenches. Dean read every line. He traced the clauses with the steady attention of someone who'd fixed machines that couldn't afford to fail. Questions Juliet asked when silence settled. Dean said, What do I call you when we're off camera, Juliet? She said. Not Ms. Hart. Titles have their place. They don't have to live in the kitchen. And the second he said, the air tightening around the table, Who's going to hate this the most? Maya flicked to her final slide a grayscale headshot with a smile that didn't quite reach either eye. Conrad Vale, she said. Activist, investor. He's not our enemy. He's a misaligned incentive. He believes your work ethic is a smokescreen for soft edges, and he's betting he can pressure you out if he makes enough noise. Our job is not to fight him in public. It's to show our homework and let the numbers carry their own megaphone. Dean considered the photo. He looks like a man who thinks a broom only goes one direction. Juliet's voice found warmth without losing steel. Let me worry about Conrad. And who worries about you? Dean asked before he could swallow it. Maya's gaze slid sideways, surprised then. Not. Juliet didn't look away. I do, she said, and for 3 weeks apparently you do. A small smile. The kind that changes a room nudged the corner of Dean's mouth. Then let's write it down. They signed. Ink scratched a compact promise on heavy paper. It wasn't romance. It was respect bound in clauses that protected the softest thing either of them owned: time, with a child time, with a company built bolt by bolt. When they finished, Juliet capped the pen like she was closing a door softly. After the hours we'll meet at the cafe, she said. Not for cameras, to rehearse exits and entrances so we don't step on each other's toes tonight. If you can drink coffee at this hour, Dean said. I can drink an apology if it's warm, she returned. Maya gathered the papers. I'll circulate badges and briefing notes. I want both of you to pick a single sentence you can say if cornered that won't feed the beast. She stood. Mine is, we're focusing on the work. It's original as a doorknob, but it opens rooms. Dean thought a moment. How about, we keep our promises where the cameras aren't? Maya paused, nodded. That's clean. Juliet tilted her head. And mine, she said, eyes on Dean, rather than the skyline, is, we treat people like they're not disposable. The boardroom felt less like a stage and more like a bench in a quiet station waiting for a train they'd chosen. They broke. In the elevator, the mirror gave them back 3 different wars and 1 new language how to be simple together in a complicated place. At the lobby, Juliet's assistant offered a garment bag and a schedule printed like a hymn. See you at the cafe, Juliet said to Dean, voice low enough to be theirs alone. After the dinner rush, we'll practice, we won't perform. Dean nodded. I'll bring the cup. You bring the spine. I won't leave home without it, she said. The cafe, after peak hours, wore the gentleness of a room exhaling. Chairs tucked themselves in. The bell over the door chimed like a polite throat clearing. Dean was behind the counter sleeves, rolled the espresso machine sounding like rain on a tin roof. When Juliet walked in dark dress and a garment bag over her shoulder, he raised a hand in greeting the way you greet a neighbor, not a headline. Stage marks, he said, sliding a pair of coasters onto the floor like taped X's. This one keeps you angled away from the worst glare. This one keeps me from blocking your face with the tray if I have to block the camera. She set her bag down, stepped onto her mark. What do we do if someone asks for our origin story? We tell the truth without the obituary, Dean said. You came in out of the rain. I handed you a cup. We were kind. Juliet repeated it softly, testing the grain of the sentence. We were kind. He poured her a small latte, nothing photogenic, everything honest. There's another part to my fee, he said, almost casual. She looked up. Name it. You don't say sorry for needing help, he said. You don't weaponize humility to make other people comfortable. Juliet's smile tilted. You negotiate like a union, and a chaplain had a son. Best I can do, he said. You? My term, she said. Matching his steadiness is that you tell me if I cross a line. I'm good at running into burning buildings as long as they're made of paperwork. Sometimes I forget humans can catch. Deal, he said, and they shook on it hands firm, no theater. The bell chimed. Leo struggled through the door with a backpack the size of a bold decision. We practicing? He asked, hopeful. We are, Dean said. You're stage manager. When I say curtain, you check the alley and the front window and tell me if we're clear. Leo saluted. Juliet crouched to his height. You're the boss. Good. Most rooms forget they need one. He considered this gravely. I accept. They ran the beats once, twice, entrance, pivot, greet, exit until the choreography felt like decency disguised as habit. At the end, Juliet slipped into her garment bag and emerged the way a lighthouse does, not brighter, just more precise. Ready? Dean asked. Juliet looked at them both, father polishing a coffee shield boy with a backpack full of math and courage, and said, Ready. Leo peered through the glass and gave a solemn thumbs up. Curtain. They stepped into the evening they had chosen toward a ballroom where marble waited to test whether people in good shoes could still stand for something. Tonight would be the first public scene of a story neither of them wanted, but both of them would own. The marble floor gleamed like a chessboard, every square a calculated move. Crystal chandeliers scattered light across silk gowns and sharp tuxedos. The ESG Fund Launch Gala wasn't just an event. It was a theater of influence, and Juliet Hart walked into it with Dean Walker at her side, their pace perfectly in step. Breathe. Like this is just another Tuesday, Juliet murmured without moving her lips. Dean's gaze swept the room. Familiar habits from janitor shifts in high-security towers. And if Tuesday happens to have more diamonds than oxygen, then we pretend they're rhinestones, she said. Her eyes locked ahead. The cameras caught them instantly. Flashes burst. The slow ripple of recognition spread through the crowd. Dean's suit was borrowed but fit him like he'd earned it. Juliet's emerald dress caught the light like a blade. Together they looked like a headline that had stopped running long enough to breathe. Then it happened half a step into the thrum of the gala, Juliet's right heel caught on the edge of the carpet. The faint snap of leather and metal was lost under the music, but she felt it an unmistakable give. Dean's hand shot out, steadying her at the elbow before anyone could see the shift in her balance. His voice was low calm. Don't look down. Smile. Juliet's jaw tightened. It's broken. Not tonight it isn't, Dean said. He guided her with the precision of a dance partner to a small recess along the wall just out of the main camera sweep. Hold here. 2 minutes. From somewhere, a bar tray, an instinct, Dean produced a slim black pouch from his inside pocket. Juliet blinked. You carry tools to a gala. You carry armor, he said, kneeling to examine the damage. I carry repairs. The gash in the heel was clean, the pin bent just enough to wobble. Dean's fingers were steady as he retrieved a safety pin and a strip of medical tape from the pouch. He glanced up. Don't ask why I have this. Some things about janitors are classified. Juliet smirked despite herself. You're kneeling in a $5,000 tux, fixing a $200 heel with 50 cents worth of hardware. Exactly, Dean said, securing the heel in quick, practiced movements. Value's not about price tags, it's about whether it holds when it matters. She looked down at him, not as the CEO surveying a problem to be solved, but as a woman seeing someone refuse to let her falter in public. Dean rose smoothly, offered his arm, ready to make the wolves wonder what just happened. Juliet took it, the repaired heel clicking against the marble as if nothing had happened. They moved toward the grand staircase leading into the main ballroom, and Dean leaned closer, his voice a thread only she could hear. Walk like you own the building, not just the stock. She did. Cameras caught the shimmer of her gown, the unshaken poise, and the man beside her who looked like he belonged there simply because he decided not to be small. Near the entrance to the ballroom, a familiar smirk awaited them. Conrad Vale, his tuxedo sharp enough to cut. He stepped forward just as Juliet reached the top of the stairs. Evening, Juliet, he said. voice laced with mock courtesy. "I almost didn't recognize you with—" "Help." Dean didn't break stride. "Careful," he said mildly. "You almost sound impressed." Conrad's eyes narrowed, but Juliet's smile was flawless. "Conrad, I hope you'll enjoy the speeches tonight. I hear integrity is making a rare appearance." The flash from a nearby camera froze the moment her poised him bristling Dean at her side like quiet punctuation that made the sentence land. Inside, the gala swelled with chatter. Waiters glided by with champagne. Dean kept a soft buffer between Juliet and the crowd, intercepting overzealous handshakes and steering her gently toward allies. They stopped at a circle of investors discussing sustainable building practices. Juliet engaged, precise and warm, while Dean stood just behind her shoulder. One of the older investors eyed Dean. "And what's your area of expertise?" Dean didn't flinch. "Maintenance. I make sure things built to last actually last." The man chuckled. "You'd be surprised how rare that is in our world." "I'm learning," Dean said, his gaze drifting back to Juliet, "that it's rare everywhere." Juliet caught the line, her lips curving. She excused herself from the circle, motioning for Dean to follow. "That was good," she murmured. "I wasn't performing," Dean replied. "I was telling the truth." The rest of the evening played out like a script they hadn't rehearsed but somehow knew by heart. When Juliet gave a short toast about ethical growth, Dean stood just inside the frame, not smiling for the cameras but listening. Really. Listening like the words were a blueprint worth following. They made it through the evening without another slip until they reached the valet station outside. Rain had returned, dotting the pavement with silver coins. Dean opened the car door for Juliet, and in the reflection of the black sedan they both saw it. Her repaired heel still holding strong. She looked up at him. "You saved me from a very public fall." Dean shook his head. "You saved yourself. I just gave you a way to keep walking." The driver pulled away from the curb. Juliet glanced out the window at the flashing lights fading behind them. "Dean," she said after a moment, "what you did tonight, it's not something I can put in a contract." "That's fine," he said quietly. "The best work doesn't make it into contracts." Her phone buzzed in her clutch. A headline was already circulating: "Juliet Hart stuns at ESG Gala with mystery partner who is he." She could see the photo, her poised mid-step, Dean, just behind arm, ready if she needed him. It was better than any staged image her PR team could buy. But as the car rolled into the night, Juliet saw a new notification, a message from Maya. "We've got a problem." Anonymous email. "CPS report on Dean just hit my desk." Juliet's chest tightened. Dean sat beside her, unaware, his gaze on the rain-slick streets. "Something wrong?" he asked. She forced her voice steady. "We'll talk tomorrow." Outside, the city lights blurred in the glass as if the night itself knew the next chapter wouldn't be all chandeliers and applause. The knock wasn't loud, but it was the kind you feel in your chest. 3 measured taps, each one carrying the weight of paperwork. Dean opened the apartment door to find a woman in a navy blazer holding a clipboard, her ID clipped high and visible. Child Protective Services. Behind her, the hallway smelled faintly of hallway wax and winter coats. "Mr. Walker?" she asked. "That's me." His voice stayed calm, but his grip on the door tightened. "I'm Angela Ruiz. I'm here for a scheduled home welfare check." Dean's eyes flicked to the wall clock. He knew this visit was coming, he just didn't expect it to arrive with the echo of last night's headlines in his head. From the kitchen table, Leo looked up from his half-built paper robot. "Dad, who is it?" Before Dean could answer, another knock sounded lighter, more familiar. Juliet stood at the door with a takeout bag, her hair loose rain on her coat. "Dinner delivery," she said, then caught sight of the badge in Angela's hand. Her smile paused but didn't falter. "Come in," Dean said to Angela, stepping aside. He looked at Juliet. "You too." The apartment was modest, 2 bedrooms, books stacked neatly along one wall, a rug that had seen years of homework sprawls, and the faint scent of cocoa in the air. Dean's evenings were visible in every detail, shoes lined by the door. Laundry folded in baskets, a small corkboard with Leo's spelling tests pinned in tidy rows. Angela glanced around. "I'll need to see where Leo sleeps, the kitchen, and any medications." Dean nodded. "We'll start with his room." As they walked down the short hallway, Juliet lingered back, eyes scanning the space, not in judgment, but in quiet inventory. She noticed the worn comic books on Leo's nightstand, the robot parts laid out with the precision of a young engineer. No mess hidden in corners, no chaos disguised as charm. Angela took notes, checked smoke detectors, asked routine questions. Has there been any change in your work schedule? How often is Leo left unsupervised? Dean answered without edge. Evening shifts, never without supervision. If I can't be here, he's with my sister or my neighbor. Ms. Duffy, both cleared last year. Angela nodded, making marks. School records. Dean handed her a folder already on the counter. Report cards, attendance logs, and a note from his teacher. Juliet caught the smallest shift in Angela's expression. Respect for preparation, maybe. Dean wasn't scrambling. He'd been ready. Angela flipped through the file. Leo's doing well academically. No concerns noted. Juliet stayed quiet, watching Dean's posture upright but not defensive. He wasn't performing for her. This was just who he was when the stakes were high. Angela moved on to the kitchen. Food storage is adequate, appliances functional, no safety hazards observed. She made her final notes. Mr. Walker, this visit was prompted by an anonymous concern. It's routine, but we will conduct a follow-up in 2 weeks. Dean didn't ask who filed the report. He didn't need to. You'll find the same thing then, he said evenly. Angela gathered her clipboard. That's the goal. She turned to Leo. You have a good dad, kid. Leo grinned. I know. When the door closed behind her, the apartment felt smaller, the quiet heavier. Dean stood for a moment, then looked at Juliet. You didn't have to see that. I'm glad I did, she said. He exhaled, leaning against the counter. Some people hear CPS and think it means I'm failing. It doesn't. It means the system checks when someone whispers in the dark. Juliet set the takeout bag down. Then, let me be clear, I don't think you're failing. I think someone is trying to weaponize procedure against you. Dean's jaw tightened. Yeah, and they're dragging my kid into it, not if I can help it. He shook his head. Juliet, no, listen, she cut in, her voice steady. I'm not here to bulldoze into your fight, but I can connect you with a family attorney who knows CPS procedure cold. You don't have to use them, but I want you to have the option. Dean studied her for a beat. You always have a contingency plan ready. Always, she said. It's how I keep standing. Something in his shoulders eased just enough to let the moment breathe. I'll take the number. Doesn't mean I'm asking you to fight my battles. Juliet's smile was faint but real. Dean, the battles worth fighting rarely belong to just one person. They sat down to dinner, takeout containers between them, Leo chattering about his robot design. Juliet listened, asked questions, laughed at the right moments. Dean caught her watching Leo with the kind of focus she usually reserved for negotiations. When Leo went to wash up, Dean leaned back in his chair. You know you walked in here tonight right as they showed up. Timing's a skill, Juliet said. Or fate. Juliet didn't answer that. Instead, she said 2 weeks until the follow-up. That's enough time to make sure whoever's behind this realizes they can't scare you out of being his father. Dean's eyes held hers. They can try. They'll lose. The conversation shifted to logistics. Leo's school schedule. Dean's shifts the next public appearance. But under it all ran a new current trust built not in contracts or gala speeches, but in the unglamorous space of a kitchen table after the door closes on a government check-in. Later, as Juliet left, she paused at the doorway. Dean? Yeah. You didn't ask why I came tonight. He thought about it. Didn't need to. Some people show up for headlines. Others show up for the quiet parts. Juliet's lips curved, but her eyes softened. Good night, Dean. When the door shut, Dean looked at the neat row of papers still on the counter. The visit hadn't shaken him, but it had reminded him that the world had teeth and that some people would stand beside you when it decided to bite. In another part of the city, Maya Chen closed her laptop with a sharp snap. On her screen, an internal email thread scrolled into memory, one that traced the CPS tip to a name she knew all too well. Conrad Vale's assistant. She reached for her phone. Tomorrow there would be calls to make, and this time she wouldn't be polite. The presentation room looked like it had been designed to impress even the most jaded investor. Glass walls framing the city skyline, rows of leather chairs, a sleek projector humming softly above. Juliet stood at the head of the table, every inch the poised CEO. Dean sat 3 rows back, not as part of the team but as the boyfriend, a presence meant to humanize her in a room of sharp suits. From his seat, Dean could see Leo's handwriting on the corner of Juliet's notes, a little doodle of a coffee cup with the words, "Good luck." It was the kind of detail no one here would notice, but Dean held on to it like an anchor. Juliet began. Thank you for joining us to discuss the Heartline Kawahara partnership for our coastal hotel project. Today, we'll finalize the design specs before moving to contract signing. The projector clicked to life, casting the blueprint onto the wall. The lines were crisp, the layout sophisticated, the kind of thing that drew murmurs of approval from the front row. Juliet moved smoothly through her talking points, square footage, sustainable materials, load capacities until Dean's brow furrowed. Something was wrong. He tilted his head, tracing the beam layout in his mind. Years of maintenance work in high-rises had left him with an instinct for structural logic, and right now, the logic wasn't adding up. Juliet advanced to the next slide. Dean raised a hand slightly, not high enough to interrupt, but enough to catch her eye. Her gaze flicked to him for less than a second, but it was enough. She knew. Before we proceed, Juliet said smoothly, "Let's pause on that last diagram. I'd like everyone to take another look at the load distribution." A ripple of confusion passed through the room. The lead architect frowned, zooming back to the slide. Dean rose quietly from his seat. "May I?" The architect hesitated. Juliet nodded. "Go ahead, Dean." Dean approached the wall, pointing to a section near the south wing. "I'm no engineer," he began, "but I've worked on enough buildings to know these support beams aren't aligned with the load they're supposed to carry. According to IBC and OSHA basics, this could mean extra strain over time, and in a coastal location that's a risk you don't want." The room stilled. The Japanese delegate from Kawahara Holdings leaned forward, eyes narrowing not in anger, but in interest. "Are you certain?" Dean nodded. "Certain enough that I'd bet every wrench I own. If you want specifics, your engineers can run the numbers, but I'd strongly suggest it before anyone signs." The architect flushed. "We can review. It's possible a drafting error slipped through in the last revision." Juliet didn't gloat. She simply said, "Then let's make sure we're building something worthy of everyone's name on that contract." It took 30 minutes for the engineering team to confirm Dean's observation. The error wasn't catastrophic, but it would have caused legal headaches and potential safety risks down the line. When they returned with the corrected blueprint, the mood in the room had shifted not toward embarrassment, but toward respect. The Kawahara delegate spoke first. "Ms. Hart, most would have signed and dealt with problems later. You chose to stop." Juliet met his gaze. "Integrity costs less when you pay it up front." The delegate smiled faintly. "And you have good eyes in your corner." Dean returned to his seat without ceremony, but Juliet's glance followed him. It wasn't gratitude exactly, it was something deeper. The kind of look that said you didn't have to, but you did. When the meeting ended, the delegates shook hands warmly. No one mentioned the delay. If anything, the signed agreement carried more weight now. But the quiet victory didn't survive the elevator ride down. Maya was waiting in the lobby, phone in hand, face tight. "Juliet, we have a problem. Conrad's people just pushed a story to 2 blogs. Headline reads, 'Heartline CEO relies on Janitor for business decisions. Is the board at risk?'" Juliet's jaw set. They turned a safety save into a weakness. "Of course they did," Maya said. "That's how the game works." Dean exhaled slowly. "So I'm the unqualified boyfriend now. You're the reason they have a safe building to break ground on," Juliet said sharply. "But in their version, you're a prop in my PR stunt who's overstepping." Maya's eyes softened for a fraction. "We can't stop them from spinning. What we can do is control the next scene. Don't take the bait. We keep our tone steady, our work clean, and we don't make this about personalities." Dean looked between them, and Leo Maya's voice was careful. "We'll monitor coverage, but the more they frame you as the mystery janitor, the greater the risk someone digs for personal details. We'll keep your son's name out of it." Juliet stepped closer, her voice low enough that only Dean could hear. "This is where you trust me." Dean held her gaze. "And this is where I remind you Leo comes first. Always." She didn't blink. Always, she echoed. That evening, the cafe felt quieter than usual. The espresso machine hissed softly as Dean pulled a shot for a regular, but his mind was still in that conference room, those beams that moment, and the way the narrative had already been twisted before the ink on the contract dried. Juliet walked in coat, unbuttoned, the kind of tired you don't show on magazine covers. She slid into a stool at the counter. Double espresso. No milk. Dean raised an eyebrow. "Rough day. I don't mind rough," she said. "I mind dishonest." He set the cup down in front of her. "You can't fix dishonest people." "No," she said, sipping. "But you can make them irrelevant." Dean leaned on the counter. And how do you plan to do that? Juliet met his eyes. By building something they can't tear down, and by making sure the people who help me do it know exactly how much I trust them. It wasn't an apology. It wasn't even a thank you. It was something steadier, a statement of alignment, like two beams meeting at exactly the right angle. Leo appeared from the back holding his nearly finished paper robot. Dad, I think it's ready. Dean smiled. So's the next round. He glanced at Juliet. We're going to need both. Outside, the city moved on headlines, churning lights, shifting stories, twisting. Inside, 3 people shared a quiet table, the kind of moment no one would ever put in a press release. And somewhere uptown, Conrad Vale was already planning his next move. The morning talk show was already mid-segment when Maya's text hit Juliet's phone. Turn on Channel 5. Now. Juliet did, and there he was. A corporate image consultant with slicked-back hair and the smug ease of someone paid to say things that cut deep. On the lower third, the chyron read PR stunt or poor judgment. The host smiled in that practiced, complicit way. You're suggesting this relationship isn't entirely genuine. The man leaned back. Look, the optics are obvious. Juliet Hart, under pressure from activist investors, brings a janitor into the spotlight. That's not romance. That's a calculated distraction. It's quaint. Cheap, even. Juliet muted the TV, jaw tight. The problem wasn't that they doubted her. It was that they made Dean into a punchline. And the audience laughed like it was free. At the same time, in a midtown diner, Dean was pouring cream into his coffee when the same segment came on the overhead screen. He didn't usually watch morning TV, but there was no ignoring it when half the room turned to look at him after the janitor line. Man, if they said that about me, the cook muttered from behind the counter, I'd have a few words ready. Dean set his cup down. Yeah, I've got a few. By noon, Dean was in Juliet's office. The skyline was sharp behind her, sunlight throwing clean lines across the desk. He didn't sit. I want to respond, he said. Juliet looked up from her laptop. Dean, no. I'm not asking for permission to be angry. I'm asking to defend my name before someone like that defines it for me. Her fingers tightened on the pen in her hand. And I'm asking you not to, because if you step in front of their cameras, they'll make you the story. Not us, not Heartline. You. Maybe I want that, he said sharper than he intended. You don't, she countered. Because then they drag Leo in. They'll pull pictures from school newsletters. They'll investigate your past. They'll Juliet. He cut her off. I'm not ashamed of my past. Her voice softened, but the edge remained. You're not the one I'm worried about. He heard the truth in that and still felt the sting. So I'm supposed to sit here and watch them turn me into a joke. Yes, she said, if it means you stay out of the blast radius. They were standing too far apart for the conversation to land anywhere but between them. By evening, Leo had picked up enough from the edges of adult conversation to make his own conclusion. He sat at the kitchen table, backpack at his feet, avoiding his homework. Dad, he said, finally. Are you embarrassed about me? Dean froze. What? No. Where's that coming from? I heard you and Juliet, Leo mumbled. You don't want to be on TV because of me. Dean knelt so they were eye level. Buddy, no. I don't want you on TV because you're a kid and you deserve to be a kid without strangers talking about you. That's it. Leo didn't look convinced. It feels like you're hiding me. Dean swallowed. I'm protecting you. Those are not the same thing. But Leo's eyes had that clouded distance kids get when they've already decided how the story goes. I want to stay at Grandma's tonight. It wasn't punishment. It wasn't even a tantrum. It was the quiet withdrawal that hurt most. Later alone in his apartment, Dean stood by the window watching the streetlights come on. The city hummed below, indifferent. His phone buzzed Juliet. CPS is doing the follow-up tomorrow, she said. I know. They'll find progress. But what? They'll also ask about the media attention. It's part of the review if they think it could affect Leo's well-being. Dean's hand tightened on the phone. So now gossip counts as a threat. It can, Juliet said quietly, if it hurts him. There was silence between them, heavy but not empty. Finally, she said, Dean, I hate this part. Yeah, he said, me too. The CPS follow-up the next afternoon was as methodical as the first. Angela Ruiz with her clipboard asking about Leo's routines, schoolwork, moods. He's doing well, Angela said, making her notes. But I have to mention media coverage can be stressful for a child. It's not about content, it's about exposure. My recommendation is to have a media protection plan. Dean nodded slowly. What does that look like? Clear boundaries, she said. No interviews involving him, no photos without your consent, and monitoring for any leaks of personal information. Juliet, seated at the table, spoke for the first time. We can put that in place immediately. Heartline's legal team can help draft the language. Angela smiled faintly. That will help. When she left, the apartment felt quieter again, but not in the same way as last time. This quiet was laced with a strange kind of relief, like they'd survived a wave even if another might come. Dean turned to Juliet. You were right. About the cameras. She didn't say I told you so. She just said I wish I hadn't been. For a moment, neither moved. Then Dean spoke, voice low. Leo thinks I'm ashamed of him. Juliet's eyes softened. Then we show him you're not. Not with a speech. With time. With the kind of days no one can twist into headlines. Dean nodded, not because it solved everything, but because it was the only answer worth giving. Outside, the winter light faded into evening. Inside, they sat at the table, not talking strategy or headlines, just letting the quiet mend a little of what the noise had frayed. It wasn't victory, but it was a start. The park wore a clean light, the kind that makes even city breath sound gentle. Morning joggers sliced through the air. A dog barked twice and forgot its complaint. Juliet stood on the path with both hands wrapped around a paper cup she wasn't drinking. Dean arrived without fanfare, a sweatshirt, a steady gait, the look of a man who slept like someone else needed him awake. Thanks for meeting me before work, she said. Sunrise rates are reasonable, he answered, then caught the strain in her eyes. Tell me what you already decided. She exhaled. No theatrics. We should pause the pretending. The sentence landed with the crispness of frost. A beat later, the ache. Dean didn't move. Pause, he repeated, tasting the word like it might mean exit. For how long? 3 weeks was our plan, she said carefully. But what's happening to Leo isn't in the plan. Talk shows turn people into content. I won't be another knife. He looked past her to the pond where a boy launched a paper boat he'd folded too tightly. It sank with dignity. You think stepping back protects him? Dean said, voice even. What I hear is you stepping away. I'm not stepping away from you, Juliet said too quickly to be casual. I'm stepping between you and harm. There's a difference, maybe he said, but from my side of the street distance and protection cast the same shadow. Silence. Somewhere, a siren decided not to be urgent. Juliet loosened her grip on the cup and forced herself to say the ungraceful truth. I care about your boy Dean. Enough to let headlines accuse me of retreat. Enough to be misunderstood. He studied her face like a blueprint, searching for the beam that would hold. If this is the right call for Leo, I'll take the bruise, he said finally. But I need one promise. Name it. When you're scared, you don't make that my job to guess. Juliet nodded the concession clean. Agreed. They walked once slow around the lake's edge. No plan, no choreography. Only the offbeat of two people trying not to break something they hadn't named. At the park gate, Juliet paused. I'll brief Maya. We'll take down anything that feeds the fire. You don't owe the crowd a rebuttal. Dean's smile tugged and didn't quite arrive. I never did. He turned toward the subway and she watched him go, the city swallowing him with the gentleness it reserves for no one. At the cafe before opening the air was an inventory of comfort. Warm wood, clean glass. The faithful hiss of a machine clearing its throat. Dean, prepped in muscle memory filters, set cups stacked while the bell above the door stayed quiet like a secret. Maya slipped in through the side entrance coat slung over her arm, hair caught in a practical knot. We're going dark on anything performative, she said without hello. I've drafted copy that says we're focusing on the work. It's so boring it'll be invisible. Invisible sounds like a good color, Dean said. She studied him. Juliet told you. She did. And you. I don't like it, he said without heat. I respect it. Maya nodded, relief briefly visible before professionalism swallowed it. There's something I want you to know off the record and off the stage. She lowered her voice. Juliet asked me to establish a scholarship fund. Children of night shift maintenance and sanitation workers. Anonymous grantor. Clean governance. Launch after this storm passes. Dean's hands stilled on a stack of saucers. She tell you to tell me? No, Maya said. She told me not to. She doesn't want gratitude to confuse the geometry. Maya's mouth curved. My job sometimes is to break her rules for the right reason. He looked at the espresso machine like it could translate the knot in his chest. Tell whoever's funding it that some things don't need names to be true. I will, Maya said. Then she slid a plain envelope onto the counter. Also for your counsel. Third-party trust is set. It's boring enough to survive. Dean rested his palm on the envelope like checking a pulse. Thank you. Thank Juliet, Maya said, by not thanking her. A faint smile. You two are a problem set. Only for people who profit from mess, Maya replied, already drifting toward the door. She stopped, turned. One more thing. Avoid the morning shows today. What did they do? Dean asked, but he knew. Maya hesitated. They turned last night's photo into a meme. You and Juliet split-screened with a laugh track. It's mean in the casual way that rots the floorboards. Dean's jaw set. Copy that. After she left, he flipped the sign to open with the dignity of a ceremony and served the first customer with a kindness that owed nothing to the weather. At 10, 2 college kids sat near the window, phones bright. One snorted. Dude, this edit, look at his face. America's boyfriend janitor. Dean wiped a clean table that didn't need wiping. The owner caught his eye, offered a small, helpless shrug. The day moved on. The machine hissed. Cups clinked. At lunch, a courier brought a cardboard poster tube ad for a talk show taping the kind cafes sometimes hang for foot traffic. The art department had done its cruel work, a collage of Juliet mid-speech and Dean with a coffee tray, a sarcastic heart stamped between them. Dean stood a long second, then peeled the tape from the back. He didn't rip it. He didn't curse. He rolled it carefully back into the tube and set it behind the counter to return. Some battles you win by refusing to decorate your house with them. He took his break late, sitting in the back with a paper cup of water he didn't drink. On the community board, the bulletin pins held their ground-lost cat. AA Tuesday, piano lessons, a child's drawing of a robot with the caption, I can fix things. Leo's print handwriting. Dean touched the corner lightly and found his breath again. That afternoon, the city remembered to be sharp. Juliet walked out of a meeting to a sun that made the sidewalks honest. She didn't check her phone. She checked a list, legal security, HR. Then she went to her office door and stood a minute longer than a person with no time should stand, letting quiet say what words sometimes ruin. Maya entered without knocking. We have a trail, she said, the words clipped to keep from shaking. Conrad's assistant routed a concerned citizen email through a burner, then used a private PR vendor to plant it. The seed that triggered the CPS visit came from their office. Juliet's fingers wrapped the back of her chair. You're sure? I don't bring you maybes, Maya said. She placed her phone on the desk and hit play. An audio file. A whispering hall, a men's room. Echo, then Conrad's voice, careless in triumph. If CPS spooks him, Hart folds the stunt. Simple pressure, clean hands. Juliet's eyes cooled. There's that word again, she said softly. Clean. Maya's gaze met hers. We don't leak this, she said. Not yet. We catalog, we secure chain of custody, and we choose our ground. Juliet nodded. Tonight, Investor Conference Hotel loading docks. I want him cornered where echoes are useful. Maya lifted a brow. You're going to him. I'm done letting him pick rooms, Juliet said. He's been bullying air. It's time he met concrete. Maya's mouth tipped. I'll bring the recorder you like. And a witness who smiles like an intern, Juliet added. We'll look harmless until we aren't. She reached for her coat. Maya blocked the door, a rare mutiny. Before you walk out there, say the quiet thing out loud. Juliet hesitated. The room held. I miss him, she admitted, the words small and enormous. Even in the silence, he's a shape I look for. Maya softened. Then finish this. So the quiet we build next belongs to you. Dusk pushed its shoulder against the cafe windows. The dinner rush took its polite time arriving. Dean cleaned the steam wand with ritual attention and pretended not to watch the door. Leo would be back from Grandma's soon. The apartment would smell like cocoa and pencil shavings again. A man at the counter lifted his phone toward Dean. You, the guy, he asked, not unkindly but with the entitlement of a stranger who has decided your story belongs to his amusement. Dean considered 100 answers and chose the only one he could live with. I'm the father, he said simply. What can I get you to drink? The man blinked sheepish suddenly. House blend? Black. Dean poured Slitted the cup across. No lecture, just a sentence to correct the sign on the door of the conversation. When the rush eased, he hung his apron, nodded to the owner, and stepped into evening. The street had rinsed itself twice since morning. He breathed in the clean. His phone buzzed. A text from Maya. We found the leak. It's Conrad. We've got proof. A second message from Juliet followed one beat later. Don't respond. Not yet. Tonight, I'm going to ask a bully to look me in the eye. Dean read both thumb hovering. He typed nothing. He turned toward home, toward Leo, toward the kind of night you repair from the inside out. Behind him, in another part of the city, a loading dock light flicked on. Maya pressed a fresh battery into a recorder. Juliet tightened her coat and practiced the sentence she would say like a lit match. Stop now, or I make this official. The lie had burned hot. What came next would not be performance. It would be evidence. And concrete remembers footsteps. The rain had stopped just enough to leave the pavement shining as if the city had been polished for a photograph. Juliet stood in the shadow of the conference hotel's loading dock, the thrum of the investor gala muffled by concrete and distance. Her coat was buttoned to the throat. Hair pulled back her stance, that of a woman who had chosen her ground. Maya lingered a few steps away, phone in hand, a discreet microphone clipped to her lapel. He'll come out through here, she murmured. The car picks him up at the corner. You've got 90 seconds between door and curb. Juliet's gaze stayed on the alley mouth. Plenty of time for the truth. The service door swung open with a metallic sigh. Conrad Vale emerged, jacket unbuttoned, tie loosened, the smug half-smile of a man who thinks the night belongs to him. He nearly walked past her before recognition froze his stride. Juliet, he said, as if tasting a vintage he didn't order. Interesting venue for a reunion. She stepped into the light spilling from the dock. I wanted somewhere without applause. Conrad's eyes darted toward Maya, dismissed her as unimportant. If this is about the noise in the press, it's about you feeding my company's investors lies. Juliet cut in her voice, clean as glass. And about you turning a child into collateral. He scoffed. Oh, come on. CPS visits are routine. If your janitor boyfriend can't handle... Her hand lifted not to stop him, but to signal that she'd heard enough. Be very careful, Conrad. You've been sloppy. Burners hired PR hacks, and now... She glanced toward Maya, who tilted her phone slightly, recording light winking like a signal flare. Now, you've said it out loud. His smirk faltered. What exactly do you think you have? Enough, Juliet said. Enough to walk it to the ethics committee. Enough to hand it to your board. Enough to make you spend the next 12 months explaining why you targeted an 8-year-old. Conrad's jaw twitched, but arrogance was a hard habit to break. You won't do it. You'd rather win than scorch earth. I'd rather protect what matters, she said. But here's the choice. You stop the smear campaign tonight, or tomorrow morning your name starts living in the minutes of every meeting that matters to your career. For the first time, he glanced back toward the hotel as if measuring how far the noise might carry. And if I call your bluff... Juliet stepped closer, her voice dropping to something private and lethal. Then I make sure every partner you have learns that you gamble with children's safety for a headline. And unlike you, Conrad, I don't bluff. Silence held for 3 heartbeats. Then he laughed, once short and humorless. You've changed. No, she said. I've stopped giving people like you the benefit of the doubt. He moved past her toward the curb, the echo of his footsteps shallow on wet concrete. But his phone stayed in his pocket, and for now, that was a kind of retreat. Maya exhaled slowly when he was gone. We've got it. Clean audio. His words, no spin. Juliet nodded, the tension still coiled in her shoulders. File it. Back it up in 3 places. They walked toward the street, but halfway there Juliet froze. Across the road, a knot of cameras was forming paparazzi, spilling from a black van like a coordinated spill. In the center of their lenses was a small figure in a red jacket backpack slipping from one shoulder. Leo. Juliet's breath caught. She didn't think. She didn't wait for Maya. She was moving before the thought fully formed heels striking wet asphalt, coat flaring behind her. The photographers turned the scent of a better shot in the air. Leo. She called her voice sharp enough to cut through the clatter of shutters. His head whipped around, eyes wide. A man with a camera stepped in front of him, bending low for the shot. Juliet's hand closed on Leo's shoulder a second later, pulling him gently but firmly to her side. She turned her back to the cameras, using her body and coat as a shield. This isn't your scene, she said to the nearest lens voice like cold steel. Public sidewalk, the man shot back. Not for him, she said, and started walking, Leo's small hand tucked into hers. The flashes kept coming, but her stride didn't break. Behind her, Maya's voice was sharp and commanding, summoning hotel security, calling names, writing down badge numbers. By the time they reached the corner, the photographers had been pushed back, though the damage, the photos, the intrusion was already done. Leo's voice was small. Why were they waiting for me? Juliet crouched so they were eye-level, rain collecting in her hair. Because some people think stories are more important than the people in them. They're wrong. He nodded, the trust in his eyes almost too much to bear. Dean arrived 2 minutes later, breathless from the call. Relief flickered across his face at the sight of Leo, unharmed, then hardened into something colder as he took in the scene behind them. "We're going home," he said, his voice final. Juliet straightened. "I'm sorry," she said quietly. "I didn't get there soon enough." Dean looked at her for a long moment, then down at Leo. "You got there," he said. "That's what matters." They walked together toward the waiting car, Dean on one side of Leo, Juliet on the other, an unspoken pact holding in the space between their joined steps. The street behind them swallowed the flashbulbs and shouting. Ahead was only the rhythm of 3 sets of footsteps steady against the night. And somewhere inside Juliet's coat pocket, Conrad Vale's voice was waiting on a recorder, ready to turn from evidence into consequence. The room had morning light and hard edges. Rows of chairs, a low stage with a clean podium, microphones discreet rather than hungry. Security posted along the walls, not theatrical, just present. Maya stood beside the center aisle, headset in place, eyes sweeping with the precision of a metronome. This wasn't the kind of day you improvised. Juliet stepped up from the wings and paused just behind the curtain. She could hear the press settling, the shuffle of notebooks, the throat clearing before questions sharpened themselves. At the back of the hall, an easel held a single placard. Heartline saw boy. Transparency, briefing. No tagline, no flourish. Maya touched her elbow. Deep breath. Then, say it like you're telling the truth in a room that pays attention. "That's exactly what I'm doing," Juliet said. "Good," Maya replied. "Because we're recording for our own archive, not theirs. History tends to do better with first sources." Juliet stepped to the podium. The room quieted on instinct. "Good morning," she began. "I'm Juliet Hart. I'm here without spin, and I'm here because there are things we won't fake." A small ripple cameras, clicked pens, paused. "First," she said, "I'm suspending any campaign that could be read as image varnish. For the next quarter, our public narrative will be strictly operational milestones, risks, numbers you can audit. If you came for gloss, I can point you to other rooms." A reporter in the second row raised a hand. "Ms. Hart, are you referring to your recent appearances with—" "I'll get there," Juliet said, not unkindly. "Second evidence." She nodded toward Maya, who slid a slim folder to the document camera. The screens flanking the podium lit with timestamps, emails, flowchart that was more modest than dramatic. "These are records of a coordinated smear," Juliet continued. "A burner account seeded false narratives about my leadership and targeted a private citizen, Dean Walker, with insinuations meant to trigger a Child Protective Services welfare check. The CPS did its job. They found a stable home and a good kid. The smear failed on facts, not volume." Another reporter called out, "Who's responsible for the emails?" Juliet didn't smile. "The paper trail leads to the office of Mr. Conrad Vale, an activist investor with a disclosed position against our current strategic plan. We have audio of him acknowledging the tactic." She let that sit for one beat. "Our ethics committee has the materials. So do our partners. If they choose to release more, that will be their process, not my performance." The room changed. Chairs leaned forward. The murmur folded into attention. Facts had entered and brought their own gravity. Juliet rested her hands lightly on the podium. "Now to the part that isn't about markets. Dean Walker is not a prop. He is a father and a worker whose dignity does not require my permission. The last weeks turned him into content. I consented to some appearances. I did not consent to cruelty. For that delay in drawing a line, I owe an apology." She took the apology out of press conference voice and into something human. "Dean, I'm sorry I didn't protect you soon enough. Leo. I'm sorry the noise reached your sidewalk. That's on me." The statement landed without a wobble. No hurried spin, no legalese. A veteran columnist lifted a hand. "Ms. Hart, are you confirming you and Mr. Walker are in a—" "No," Juliet said gently, and the word carried more care than denial. "I'm confirming we treat people like they're not disposable. Whatever else you want to name it will be your headline, not my habit." Maya stepped up with 2 more slides, a short policy memo, an internal email Juliet had signed at dawn. Third, Juliet said, we're filing a formal complaint with our board's ethics committee and with our partner funds regarding Mr. Vale's conduct. We are also petitioning to strengthen our investor relations code to include explicit prohibitions against targeting family members of employees or private citizens for leverage. That language should have existed already. It will now. A hand shot up. What's the immediate consequence? That's for the boards to vote on, Juliet replied. But I expect adults to behave like adults. Sometimes that looks like accountability with a paper trail. She glanced to the side stage. I have one more voice to bring forward. He's not here for spectacle. He's here because I asked him, and because he deserves his own sentence on the record. Dean stepped into the light. He wore no suit jacket, only a clean shirt and the steadiness he always carried like a tool he trusted. He didn't touch the podium. He stood beside it, hands in plain sight, as if to say, I'm not hiding anything, and I'm not performing either. Morning, he said. I'm Dean Walker. I fix things when they squeak, and I raise a boy who likes robots and cocoa. A few smiles broke uncoached. I've heard a lot of names for what the last few weeks have been, he continued. I can't answer to all of them. I can answer to one. Every night my title is the same. I'm the guy who checks math homework and warms the milk until the pan sings. That's the one that counts. Cameras don't make me more of a father. Headlines don't make me less. Silence, the deep kind, the kind that behaves. Even the shutters caught a manners lesson. I'm grateful the CPS did their job, Dean added. I'm not grateful someone tried to weaponize that process. If you're looking for a comment from me about being a mystery man, here it is. He looked straight into the room. We keep our promises where the cameras aren't. He stepped back. It wasn't grand. It was clean. Juliet returned to the mic. Questions about operational matters will go to our CFO at 11, she said. Questions about ethics will go to the committee. Questions about private citizens won't be answered. Not today. Not tomorrow. She scanned the rows. I can't make you care about the line between public and private. I can only draw it in a color you can't miss. A reporter near the aisle stood. Do you anticipate Mr. Vale facing a no-confidence vote at his other fund? That's theirs to initiate, Juliet said. But I know this, when you show your homework, the math teaches itself. Phones vibrated across the room, almost in chorus. Maya's tablet lit a banner from a partner fund announcing an emergency ethics review and a motion to consider censure. A minute later, another ping an allied board scheduling a vote to suspend Mr. Vale's advisory privileges pending investigation. Maya angled the screen so Juliet could see. Juliet didn't exhale in victory. She let the process do the speaking. Last item, she said into the mic. We'll be publishing a transcript of this briefing along with corroborating documents. Not to win the day, to honor the long day called accountability. She stepped back. The room held its breath a second longer, then questions rose like a weather front. Security guided the lanes. Maya signaled the close with a subtle nod. The lights didn't dim. They simply stopped trying to be the story. Backstage, Juliet and Dean found the corner where voices go when they need to speak quietly. You were right to keep it simple, she said. You were right to make it official, he answered. Then almost a smile, you didn't pretend. I promised I wouldn't, Juliet said. The warmth in her eyes didn't reach for more than the moment allowed. For the record, she began and stopped herself. No, not for the record. For Leo. I'm going to keep distance for a while. Dean nodded once, pain passing through his face honestly. I figured. I want whatever we are to live outside of a win, she said steady. If it stands because we choose it, not because the room applauded. He looked at her the way a man looks at a bridge he trusts not for the view, but for the integrity. Then we'll let quiet do its work. Maya appeared with an update, professional and a little luminous. 2 funds just moved to review Conrad. The narrative is pivoting. Juliet's expression didn't gloat. Good. Let the math teach. Out in the hall, a few reporters lingered, already drafting pieces that would try to make the day smaller or louder than it was. Backstage, Dean checked his phone. A text from Grandma Leo's reading after school went great. He wants to show you a new paragraph tonight. Dean's reply was immediate. Tell him I'll bring the cinnamon. He looked up. Juliet had already stepped away, giving the room back to its uses. She didn't look back to see if he'd follow. He didn't. Not yet. The victory would walk on its own legs today. What came next would not be a press moment. It would be a room with warm lamps and a chair no one ever bothered to reserve, the quiet place where policy becomes care and where 2 people decide whether feeling can survive after the noise has lowered its voice. The sign over the new door was small and unassuming, quiet room. No gold trim, no Heartline logo, just brushed steel letters that caught the light from the lobby in a way that made you look twice. Juliet stood with her hands in her coat pockets watching two members of the night shift cleaning crew step inside for the first time. They didn't know she was there. She preferred it that way. The space had been Dean's idea from the beginning. Soft chairs, shelves of paperbacks, a coffee station lockers for personal things, a corner with a worn rug for anyone who needed a stretch of floor to breathe. "Looks like it's been here forever," a voice said behind her. She turned. Dean was leaning against the doorframe. Leo standing just in front of him, peering inside like he'd stumbled onto a secret clubhouse. Juliet smiled. That was the point. No grand opening, no ribbon to cut. Just here when it's needed. Dean stepped inside, running his hand along the edge of a low bookshelf. "Feels right," he said quietly, like somebody finally remembered the people who keep the lights on. Juliet glanced at him. "You remembered. I just signed off." Leo wandered to the reading nook, picked up a dog-eared copy of the Phantom Toll Booth. "Can I read in here?" Dean looked to Juliet. She nodded. "It's for anyone who needs it." They watched Leo settle into an armchair far too big for him, his legs swinging the book opening like a door. Dean leaned closer to her. "You didn't have to let me design this." "Yes," Juliet said softly, "I did, because I'm not interested in the kind of leadership that needs to pretend it thought of everything first." For a moment they just stood there in the quiet hum of the room, the sound of a coffee pot gurgling in the background. Juliet broke the silence. "The board voted this morning. CPS officially closed the file. No follow-up required." Dean's shoulders loosened. She could see it in the way his breath came easier. "That's a relief I don't have the right words for." "Don't need words," she said. "Just keep doing what you do." He looked at her, a wry smile tugging at his mouth. "You know I still don't have a ring." Juliet's reply came without hesitation. "You've got a pair of hands that know how to build, fix, and make cocoa. That's enough." Something in Dean's expression shifted lighter, warmer. But before either of them could say more, a voice came from the doorway. Maya, tablet in hand. "Sorry to break the mood, but you've got 30 minutes before the policy announcement. And, Dean, I've already warned facilities that if they don't keep this place stocked, you'll start showing up with your own coffee filters." Dean grinned. "Threats already on the table." Juliet turned to Maya. "Is the scholarship fund ready to launch?" Maya's face softened. "Applications open tomorrow. First year's already funded. We've kept your name off it just like you asked." Dean glanced between them. "Scholarship fund." Juliet hesitated, but Maya cut in. "For children of maintenance and sanitation workers. Somebody thought it was a good idea." Dean's voice was quiet. Somebody was right. Later that day, Juliet stood in the atrium as employees gathered. She spoke briefly, not about her own role, but about what the policy meant: a formal well-being program for night shift staff, quiet rooms in every building, and the scholarship fund. She kept it free of self-congratulation, ending simply, "We can't change the world overnight, but we can change the floor we're standing on." The applause was warm, not wild, the kind that lingers because it belongs to everyone. That evening, Dean and Juliet met again in the quiet room, now empty except for them. Leo was at the apartment with Grandma, his book tucked under his arm when he left. Juliet was perched on the edge of the reading nook's low wall. "Feels different without people in here," she said. Dean sat opposite her, elbows on his knees. "Still feels like a win." Juliet's gaze met his. "Dean, I need to say this before I lose my nerve. You were never a fake boyfriend. Not for a minute. I just took the long way to admit it." He let the words sit between them, unhurried. "Long way's fine," he said finally. "Gives you time to decide what you're carrying with you." Her smile was small, but it reached her eyes. "I'm carrying this." She gestured at the space between them. "Whatever this is." He leaned back, a slow grin forming. "I don't have a ring, but I've got a kitchen, a decent pan, and the best hot cocoa recipe you'll ever have." Juliet laughed, the sound low and unguarded. "Sold." For a while they said nothing, just sat in the warmth of the room as if the walls themselves were keeping their confidence. Maya poked her head in, briefly saw their faces, and decided not to interrupt. She backed out quietly, a rare smile tugging at her lips. When they finally left, the lights in the quiet room stayed on, casting a soft glow through the glass wall into the atrium, a reminder that even in the busiest building there was space for stillness. As they walked out together into the crisp night air, Juliet glanced at Dean. "Where to home," he said. "I've got a kid waiting, and I promised cinnamon." They crossed the plaza footsteps in sync, the city around them settling into evening. The quiet between them was no longer something to fill. It was something to keep. Somewhere behind them, the quiet room waited, ready for whoever needed it next. And in front of them, the street opened wide, not with headlines or spectacle, but with the steady promise of an ordinary night done well. The cafe opened its glass doors to a clean morning. Sunlight pressed gold onto the oak tables. The chalkboard near the counter read in tidy handwriting, "Community Reading Hour, 9:00 a.m." Someone had drawn a little coffee cup beside the words "Steam" curling like music notes. Dean adjusted the open sign with the care of a ritual. Juliet straightened a stack of paper cups. The air smelled of cinnamon and warm milk. It smelled like ordinary goodness. "Ready?" Dean asked. Juliet looked at the corner where a dozen neighbors had gathered, night shift workers still in sneakers, 2 teachers with Saturday faces, and the old pianist from the lobby trying not to tear up already. "I've never been more ready to be small," she said. Leo stood on a little wooden step that Dean had sanded until it felt like kindness. He held stapled pages. His hair was combed badly in a way that made all the mothers in the room want to fix it, and none of them dare. He cleared his throat. The room hushed. "My story is called The Strongest Cup," he announced, looking at Dean, then Juliet, as if checking they were anchored. "It's about a guy who thinks he just cleans up spills, and a girl who thinks she just builds castles, and how they learned hot cocoa is really just a drink that holds a family together." Chuckle warmed the room. The old pianist dabbed at his eye. Leo began to read. His voice was small and brave, the best combination. He told about a rainy day and a door that banged like a drum roll. About a coffee tray that became a shield because good men don't need armor if they have purpose. About a broken heel made steady by hands that knew the difference between price and value. He told about a boy whose math got better when the noise got softer. He told about adults who decided that truth doesn't need fireworks, only light. Midway through, Leo looked up and found Dean. "My dad says the best things he ever fixed were quiet." He read, a smile stealing across his face. "The faucet that stopped crying. The heart that stopped worrying." Dean felt something loosen in his chest that had been clenched since the first headline. Juliet's hand brushed the counter as if steadying the day. At the last paragraph, Leo lifted his chin like a tiny orator. "The strongest cup," he read, "isn't the one that doesn't spill. It's the one you refill together even after." He lowered the pages. The end. Silence. Then applause that didn't come down for a while, not because it was perfect, because it was true. "Encore," the old pianist whispered, only half joking. Leo hopped off the step. Dean scooped him into a hug so quick and fierce it made the room look away and grin at their coffee instead. "You were brave," Dean murmured into his hair. "I learned it from you," Leo said. Juliet crouched. "And from yourself," she added. "You wrote a story and let it walk." Maya slipped in late as planned, breathing the kind of sigh that belongs to finished work. She nodded to Juliet, message received. The investigations were underway. The ethics committees had opened the books. Conrad Vale would spend the next months learning the shape of accountability. After the reading, Dean poured cocoa in 3 humble cups. He set them on the counter like medals that don't need a ceremony. To authors, he said. To quiet rooms in loud cities. Juliet answered, tapping her cup to theirs. Maya lifted her phone, then lowered it. "Some moments don't need to be captured," she said softly. "They need to be kept." Neighbors drifted out with their coats and their small talk, leaving a pleasant after silence. The chalkboard looked satisfied, like a calendar, checked off with something that mattered. Through the window, the street shone with the kind of clean that doesn't brag. Juliet turned to Dean. "I owe you a sentence," she said. "You already gave me the important ones," he replied. "No props, no pretending. Promises where the cameras aren't." She shook her head, smiling. "Another sentence, then. I choose you. Not because we won a round, because the quiet chose us back." Dean laughed, soft, disbelieving, and certain at once. "I don't have a ring." "I didn't ask for a ring," Juliet said. "I asked for your life to keep making sense next to mine." Steam rose from the espresso wand in a gentle sigh. The sunlight caught it and made a halo. Somewhere a playlist found the kind of slow song you don't rush. Juliet looked at the floor at the scuffed place where hundreds of feet had learned the choreography of ordinary grace. "Dance with me," she said. In a cafe, Dean's grin widened. "On a Saturday scandal." She lifted her hand. We started by borrowing scenes from other people. We can finish by claiming one." He took her hand. They moved small, respectful of tables of chairs of the sacred geometry of a room that had held them when the storm was loud. Dean led like a man who knew every creak in an old house. Juliet followed like a woman who'd negotiated in ballrooms and only now learned what surrender worth having feels like. The steam made a soft curtain. The shadows made a private stage. It wasn't grand. It was good. Maya, pretending to fuss with the pastry case, whispered as they turned. "Brilliance doesn't need permission." Juliet smiled without looking away from Dean. "But it does need a partner." They stopped when the song ended itself. No one clapped. The room wouldn't dare. Later, at a corner table, Maya slid a neat folder to Juliet. "Conrad suspended pending investigation at 2 funds. A third has initiated a no-confidence vote. HR and legal finalized the well-being policy. Facilities is rolling out quiet rooms in our other buildings by June. The scholarship portal's live first applications are already in." Juliet exhaled. Not triumph. Relief with a backbone. "Good. Let the paperwork teach." She turned to Dean. "You're coming to the first reading of the scholarship letters." "I'll bring tissues," he said. "I'll bring pens," Maya added, "to sign more checks." Juliet looked around the cafe at the chalk dust on the board at the door where rain had announced itself months ago at the tray that had once been a shield and was now just a tray again. "I used to think leadership meant always being the loudest," she said. "Turns out it means making room." Dean nodded. "Rooms change what people think they're allowed to feel." In the afternoon, they took a walk. No cameras, no choreography. The city had gotten on with its day as cities do when you stop asking them to applaud. Leo walked between them, backpack on fingers threaded with each of theirs. He swung their arms like a metronome that sets a gentler tempo. A sanitation crew worked the far curb. A woman from night shift waved shyly at Dean and pointed to her phone with the scholarship portal open. He waved back with a smile that could steady a kite. Dad Leo asked without breaking stride, "Does this mean we're a unit?" Dean looked at Juliet. Juliet looked at Leo. "It means we're a family," Dean said. "We'll decide our vocabulary as we go." Leo nodded satisfied. "Good, because my story needs a sequel." Juliet laughed. "Careful. Sequels are dangerous." "Only if you write them for the wrong reason," Dean said. "We'll write ours because we're still here." They reached the corner where the crosswalk sign blinked a small white promise. They waited. The light changed. They stepped off the curb, together, all three. Behind them, the cafe windows softened the room into a memory already warm. In front of them, the street made space. Ordinary, clean, honest. At the next block, Leo squeezed their hands. "We started by pretending for the world," he said, rehearsing a line he'd written himself. "And we're ending by telling the truth to each other." Juliet looked at Dean. Dean looked at Juliet. The steam of the morning still lived somewhere in their hair, their coats, their breath. It followed them like a gentle weather, not a storm, just a reminder of warmth. They didn't rush. They didn't pose. They walked. Sometimes the strongest cup isn't the one on the counter. Sometimes it's the life that holds. And that is where our story finds its quiet ending. A reminder that sometimes the strongest things are the ones no one sees. The promises kept behind closed doors. The small kindnesses that never make headlines. The love that grows steady when the noise dies down. Now, I'd love to hear from you. Where in the world are you listening from today? Your stories, your cities, your quiet victories, they matter here. Share them in the comments so we can keep this circle of hope alive. If this story touched your heart, make sure you subscribe to the channel so you never miss the next journey we'll take together. And if you think someone you know could use a little light today, share this video with them. It might be exactly what they need. Thank you for giving your time, your attention, and your heart to this story. Until we meet again. Stay kind, stay hopeful, and remember some truths are worth holding on to even when the world isn't watching.